Chapter 9 doesn't use the calculator, but all of this stuff comes up again in 9.2, so I just thought I'd do a little quick overview of it because it all carries over, and the way it's worded in Connect isn't necessarily the way it's worded in other stats classes. So the first part of all of the questions from here to the end of the semester are going to involve first stating what the null and alternate hypotheses are and whether they're left-tailed, right-tailed, or two-tailed. So for the whether it's left-tailed, right-tailed, or two-tailed, you're just going to look at what symbol is here in the alternate hypothesis. Alternate hypothesis is H1, null hypothesis is H0. If this has a not equal to sign, then it is two-tailed. If it has a less than sign, then it's left-tailed. And if it has a greater than sign, then it's right-tailed. And the way I've learned to remember left-tailed from right-tailed is to look at the greater than or less than symbol as being an arrow. And if the arrow is pointing to the left, it's left-tailed. If the arrow is pointing to the right, then it's right-tailed. Then there's some in this section usually with type 1 and type 2 errors. And if you're not already familiar with those, go and find the 9.1 videos because it takes a while to talk about what those all are. But then the other part of it, okay, so I said that it's always going to start with having you state the null and alternate hypothesis. And so sample of 450 flounder, so that's your sample size, which you'll need later, but you don't need for this one. Sample mean weight of 44.5 grams. Scientists want to perform a hypothesis test to determine how strong the evidence is that the mean weight is less than 43 grams. Because it says less than 43 grams, you know that this is going to be left-tailed and that you need the less than symbol. So null hypothesis, it's always, you're going to be filling in the symbol and the number all the time in these future ones. So null hypothesis is always the equal sign. Alternate hypothesis is always going to be greater than, less than, or not equal. Because here we're looking for less than, we're going to use the less than symbol. And the number that goes into these two is always the same number. And in this case, we know that it's 43 because that's what they're attaching the hypothesis to. They're wanting to know if it's less than 43. And if this was like a full problem, like we'll see in 9.2, then we'd use the 44.5 as the sample mean because it says sample mean right there. So that's how you distinguish between whether you're going to use 44.5 or 43. 43 is what they're looking for in the hypothesis. Then they always end with if you're going to reject or not reject, and which is followed by here it's saying the null hypothesis is rejected. So at this point we haven't even learned how we're going to know whether to reject the null hypothesis or not. But if the null hypothesis is rejected, then you're always going to say is enough evidence. So after this, they'll always be pretty much worded the same, that if the null is rejected, then there is enough evidence to conclude. In this case, it also wants you to put in that the mean age is less than 11.4 years, and that's because when you look at the alternate hypothesis, if there is enough evidence to reject the null, that means your alternative hypothesis is supported. Your alternative hypothesis says the mean is less than 11.4, so that goes in here with the 11.4. Then here's another one with type 1, type 2 errors, so that you're better off looking at the other videos I have solving the whole problem. And again, here's another type 1, type 2 error. So that's all of it. So that was a very fast review of the things that are going to come up again in 9.2 and for all the remaining chapters.